My name is Bob, and I love my two-car garage. Well, I just had something really exciting happen. That truck that you see go by right now, right out there, that truck just dropped off my new table saw. All right, well, here we go. This is pretty exciting. Get to open my brand new table saw. I think before I go any further, I better read the directions. And there's even directions here how to stand it up. And I'm going to take it step by step. The directions on this saw are great. They even have all the little nuts and bolts organized into color-coded and numbered packages. I did have to call over my buddy in order to stand this baby up because it weighed a ton. And took me a couple hours to get the mobile base on. I like the way it works. Got a little foot pedal that raises and lowers it. Look at this hand wheel. It's all shiny and pretty. You gotta love this stuff. And the turn on these feels really good. Nice and smooth. No squeaks. One of the nice little features I want to show you already of this saw, and a lot of the newer saws have this, is it's this little guy sticking up right here, which is called the riving knife. Used to be called a splitter, but this is kind of an improvement on that. The riving knife follows the blade as you raise and lower the blade, and it keeps the wood from binding on the saw. Also keeps the wood from rising up a bit and climbing over the top of the saw and kicking back on you. One of the really nice features of this particular riving knife is that it's easy to remove and replace, so it encourages you to use it. And this is really, again, one of the most important safety features on any table saw. Another nice little feature is the dust collection on this saw. It's got a hose that pretty much directly connects to the blade. Something that you might want to consider when you buy this saw is that it has a left-hand tilt on the blade, which is not what I'm used to, but I don't think it's a big deal. The model that's one up from this has a right-hand tilt. I don't know why, but it does. This enclosure that I'm installing on the side of the saw is one of the few plastic parts on this table saw. We'll see how it holds up over time. It could take a beating in my garage. The nice thing about it is that it helps once again with the dust collection, and that is a good thing. Attaching the extension wings could be a two-man job. They're very heavy, and it's pretty hard to get that first bolt started with only two hands. Rigging up a little shelf like this to hold up these extension wings while you put them on is a really good idea if you're trying to do it by yourself. All right, two things I like about this switch box I'm about to mount, and one thing I don't like. I like the fact that you can bypass the safety feature on this saw because that might be necessary sometimes. I like this big paddle for the stop paddle. That's nice. I don't like these little plastic keys that go in the on button. They're a pain because if you lose them, then you can't turn on your saw. The front and rear rails are easy enough to attach by yourself. Just make sure you use the correct size bolts. I didn't, and I had to go back and switch them out. Some are of slightly different lengths. And of course, always remember to go back and tighten up all your nuts and bolts. Sometimes you just get so excited about things you forget the basics. I ended up with a little lock washer left over, so that's not a good sign. It's something I don't like about this saw is this leg right here. It's in the wrong place because I want to put a nice little cabinet right here to hold some of my accessories, but I can change that later. That'll be another video. Now, I don't really care right now whether my saw is level or not, but I do care if it's nice and flat. So I'm making sure that all the little places where this thing joins together, that it's lined up real nice. So spend some time tightening and loosening your nuts and bolts so that everything is nice and flat. And this is looking really good. Those front and rear rails also are pretty slippery just because they're painted so well. So when you're installing that front tube, make sure you hold it in place until you have a bolt or two in. And of course, there are some adjustments that need to be made to make sure the T-square is lined up precisely parallel to the saw blade. Okay, now the distance between the brake cartridge and the blade can be adjusted, and it should be adjusted. It should be the distance of this little gauge that comes with your saw, or they say also the space of a nickel. And so I'm going to stick my little gauge down there because hardly no one has change anymore. It looks like there's a little bit too much of a gap, so I'm going to turn my screw right here. This yellow screw will decrease the spacing if I turn it clockwise. All right, well, the guard that came with this is kind of minimal. What you do is gotta flip that lever up, take the riving knife out, slide the guard back in there, fits in the same place, tighten it up, and you're ready to go. All right, I'm ready for my very first cut on my brand new saw. I've never started this up before. This is an exclusive. I did something wrong. All right, well, I just didn't know how to turn it on. So you got to flip the switch up, and then you got to pull a little stop paddle out. So that's the way it works. Go figure. All right, well, so far I really like this saw. I'm yet to give it a super thorough workout, but I will let you know if I change my mind. Seems to be a really great buy. Couple things. I would buy the mobile base if I were you, because it does make it easier to move around. Does cost $300 or $400 more, but I think it's worth it. Also, I know that some people don't like the idea of this saw because they're afraid it's just going to be going off on them all the time. Well, this saw knows the difference between just wet wood and your skin. It does go off with conductive surfaces, so perhaps copper treated wood that's really wet, it might go off then, but you can always put it in the bypass mode, and if you put it in the bypass mode, the saw will display a code that tells you that it would have gone off if the bypass mode was not on, and all those codes are in the book, and it's pretty much self-explanatory, but should not be going off all the time on you. Interestingly, if it does go off because it contacted your skin, you send that cartridge in, it has a little black box in it, and they'll send you a new cartridge for free, so that's kind of cool. Finally, I want to say that having a real safe saw like this is not a substitute for good safety practices in your shop. There's a lot of other machines that you're probably using that can potentially cut you badly. So it's important that you continue to be careful, take your time, and use just good common sense and good safety practices when you're in the shop. Well, some final words of wisdom from Bob's Two-Car Garage. If you have children, make sure that you throw away all this stuff, because you know how dangerous this can be. However, every good parent also knows that you need to hang on to all the big boxes and stuff, because this kind of stuff, even the styrofoam, your kids are going to have a blast with this stuff for a long time. Yeah, these big boxes, they're way better than most of the toys that you buy for your kids. Weeks of fun.